Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what cross him.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Bat Cave. It is Friday, December 20th, 2024. I am almost uncovided, so I decided to make another video. I've been doing a lot of study and research for what I'll do in my next video. For my Serpent by the Way book, I've been reading books like this, comparative mythology. I've been researching a lot of original sources and going through a lot of ancient histories that were written in like the 3rd to 6th century BCE, and then comparing that stuff with the Bible and archaeology and stuff like that. I've been spending a lot of time reading up on the archaeological record in Mesopotamia, so like Sumeria, the kingdom of Sargon of Akkad, and the kingdom of Hammurabi and all that stuff, and building this awesome chart which lines this stuff up to the Bible. And it's really hard because there's huge discrepancies in how this stuff is dated. These date discrepancies can range from 10 to 100 years among archaeologists, and so they've settled on these things called long count, middle count, short count, which is basically like, it's similar to what I'm doing. It's basically saying if this standard of the date is right, then here's when this guy reigned, here's when this guy reigned, here's when this guy reigned. But they literally have like 2 to 3 counts of this stuff, both for Egypt and for Mesopotamia. Well, I'm just treating the Masoretic text of the Bible as the standard, and I'm finding it really, once I try to line this stuff up, it's like my stuff from the secular history is a difference of about 30 years in terms of lining these different kings and events up, and it's a consistent 30 years. So either the King James, the Masoretic text is off by 30 years, or the archaeology is off by 30 years. But what I'm finding is most of the archaeology is based on this book by this guy named Manetho, written in the 3rd century BCE, or actually I think it's 4th century. No, it's 3rd. It's 3rd century BCE, around the same time the Septuagint's written, and it's clear that the writers of the Septuagint are looking at this thing as they're changing the genealogies for the Septuagint, and I'm going to get into all that in another video. But the point is I'm probably going to redo everything I've told you guys in my Serpent by the Way playlist, because I've learned so much more, and there's a lot of things that I suppose that were based on things that were written in the Second Temple period that I now know to be BS. Those were things that probably Jews were doing in the Second Temple period, like I'm doing now. And then they rewrote this stuff as the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Enoch and stuff like this, where they could lace all this stuff in and pretend it had divine origins. But it looks like they're attempting to do things like I'm doing now with less good information, essentially, because we've had all this archaeology since then. So essentially my next video is going to be kind of an intro to that, where I'm going to talk about the Septuagint versus the Masoretic text, some of these old texts, and then where I'm going to start my dating from, and kind of talk about the pre-flood area, because I'm finding a lot of the original gods are just based on like Cain and Abel, and Adam and Eve, and Noah and Nama, and just really, really easy to reconcile stuff when you understand that most of these gods have titles rather than names, and you just break down the title or the name to title to what the words mean, and it's really obvious. Okay, that's Noah. Okay, that's Lamech. Okay, that is, Enoch. Okay, that's Methuselah. It's just really obvious when you start to look at it. So again, that's for my next video. I want to keep up on my pattern of doing one just teaching through the Bible before I do, the other more controversial one, because I want you guys to be growing in just understanding the word itself, just really getting knowledgeable of what the word says. So I think the last one we were getting into, I've been reading ahead so I get a little confused, but I think we were getting to around the point where Jezebel was going to fall. Ahab gets killed in this battle. Jezebel might have gotten killed. And then we're going to get into what happens with Jezebel's son, her son-in-law, which is going to be Jehoshaphat's son, and then Athaliah, which is going to be her daughter, who's married to him after he gets killed, trying to wipe out the line of David. So all this stuff is going to kind of take you to the period. I'm going to hopefully take you right up to the period where the other written prophets began, because most of this, actually, like the whole second half of First Kings and the whole first half of Second Kings is largely dominated by Elijah and Elisha. And then we're going to get to the fourth generation from the guys who overthrow Ahab and Jezebel, because he tells them there's going to be 4 generations, then you guys are going to be overthrown. And that's when we have Jonah mentioned, and that's when we know all these other prophets begin, because they start listing. We preached in the days of Jeroboam, king of Israel, and that's Jeroboam the second. So Jeroboam the first is the Jeroboam who breaks off and starts northern Israel in the first place. Jeroboam the second is that third, I think the third or fourth generation from Jehu, who overthrows Jezebel. So that kind of takes you to the close of the semi-legitimate period of the Israel kings, and it just starts being like coup after coup after coup for like another, let's say, 40, 50 years, and then Israel is gone. And that period is going to be obvious, like the prophets are prophesying it, and then you see it unfolding in First Kings, and then we get into guys like Isaiah, Micah, and Joel in Jerusalem, and they're prophesying about the same period leading up to the Assyrian invasion. And then we're going to have kind of a gap, because we have like a 50-year gap with no prophets, and then we kind of reemerge with Josiah and Jeremiah and guys like that. So anyways, we're going to start. Let's see. So I'm going to start here. I probably read some of this stuff in the last video, but I'm going to start here anyway in 2 Kings 9. And this is where Elisha kind of commissions the guys that are going to overthrow the line of Ahab and Jezebel. So this is 2 Kings 9. He says, "And Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, Gird up thy loins and take up this vial of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when you come..." Well, let's get out of this. "And when you arrive, look there for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and bid him to rise up from his fellows and lead him to an inner chamber. Then take a flask of oil and pour it on his head and said, Thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel. Then open the door and flee, do not tarry." So of all the kings of Israel, you want to remember there's only, I think, 2 that are actually anointed by God. One is going, there might be a third, I could be mistaken. But one is going to be Jeroboam the first, who's the first king of Israel, and the second is going to be Jehu, who overthrows Ahab and Jezebel. Other than that, it's more like coups and overthrows, and then Omri, Ahab's dad, gets kind of elected by the people because he was a legitimate commander under the king who got overthrown. And so he's going to overthrow the king, then overthrow the king, and he's going to be the king. But the rest after that, after you get to the 4th generation, it's just going to be coup, and the guys don't last long. They might have like one good kingdom of 20-some years, and then their son gets overthrown. So at most, or they just get overthrown. So we'll get into all that later. But he says to the young man. So the young man, the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he came, behold, the commanders of the army were in the council, and they said, "I have an errand, O commander." And Jehu said, "To which does it fall?" And he said, "To you, O commander." So I would assume Jehu's already a commander in the army. So Ramoth Gilead, so Jabesh Gilead, if you remember the Gileadites, Jabesh Gilead is right over here. It's kind of just across the river from Samaria. It's kind of over the river and uphill from here. Ramoth Gilead is kind of in the outskirts here. So you want to think about like kind of a band of men who are somewhat isolated from this. Assume these are Gileadites and Manassites. Remember, you're going to have essentially, I mean, again, he could just be a commander from another tribe who just happens to be out there. But you're going to have mostly Ephraimites and Manassites, and arguably people from Issachar in the kingdom of northern Israel. But it seems like it's mostly Manassites and Ephraimites because Joseph and Judah are the 2 who kind of get the royal prophecies from Jacob. So Ramoth Gilead, let's see. I want to see a better map here. So here's Judah, here's Jerusalem, here's Samaria up here, and then Ramoth Gilead is way over here in Manasseh. Okay, this is Bashan, where Og king of Bashan was, but this is essentially the Gileadites, who are, if you remember, half Manassites, and they're also married in with Arameans, and this is gonna come into play because the Arameans who have taken over at Damascus are going to be in and out of the drama with Israel and Judah from here on out. So he arose and went to the house, and the young man poured oil on his head, and he said, "You're going to be the king." And then he said, "You shall strike down the house of Ahab your master, that I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of the servants of the Lord." So if you remember, Ahab has already been killed. It's basically just Jezebel ruling now. I think he has another son who's going to take the throne, but I don't know if he's officially done that yet, and I think his sons are kind of young. So he says, "For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah." So God specifically overthrew Baasha, who overthrew Jeroboam's house, and then Omri took over. And I don't think God didn't anoint Omri, but he's not necessarily against Omri, because he's really basically avenging a legitimate overthrow of power. So I don't think Omri is looked at by God as like a wicked person for doing what he did, but he is not anointed. God didn't pick him to be the king, the people did. And so now God is overthrowing his house with Ahab, and he says, "The dog shall eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel, and none shall bury her." And then he opened the door and fled. And this "none shall bury her," I believe that was a prophecy. I forget who gave the prophecy. Yeah, it's Elijah. Elijah gets that prophecy from the Lord about her being eaten by dogs. When Jehu came out to the servants of his master, they said to him, "Is all well? Why did this mad fellow come to you?" And he said to them, "You know the fellow and his talk." So he seems to, they're basically calling the prophet who came to him a mad fellow, and he's like, you know how these guys are. So he seems to be downplaying the fact that he's been anointed. And they said, "That is not true. Tell us now." And he says, "Thus he spoke to me, saying, Thus the Lord, says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel." Then in haste every man of them took his garment and put it under the bare steps, and they blew the trumpet and proclaimed Jehu as king. So apparently his troops were all about this. And this is what this probably is this is, remember, Ramoth Gilead is kind of like an outskirt army, and Israel has had some problems with the Arameans. So this is probably like a garrison that's set out up here to defend them against the Arameans. And they're like, basically, go overthrow the center of the kingdom over here. Now, the Judahites have kind of been they're too big of a threat to the Philistines. What you never have is the Philistines and the Judahites being frenemies against Israel and vice versa, because both of them are kicking the crap out of the Philistines the whole time. David has some friendly Philistines in Gath, but he's essentially annexed that territory. And what they would call Pentapolis, because of the 5 Philistine cities here, they never really rise again, and they're just kind of, you have Israel fighting to take some territory from them in the days of Omri, but they're not going to join everybody. So Judah's kind of got their southern enemies occupied in terms of Moab, Edom, and Philistia, and so they don't really need to. Phoenicia's always just a passive trade civilization. It was dominated by the Danites and Asherites, and so they never become a military threat to them. And their main military threat is up here at Ammon. You're going to have Moabites and Ammonites and Edomites kind of join people who are attacking Jerusalem and Israel once in a while, but you're never having them engaging in one-on-one combat with them. So they're like, let's go overthrow this, and this is going to be ours, and it sounds like a good idea. So thus Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. So Joram would have been Ahab's son, who inherited the throne from him. Now Joram with all Israel had been on guard at Ramoth Gilead against Hazael of Syria, but King Joram had returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him, upon which he fought with Hazael, king of Syria. So Joram, I forget exactly how this goes, because I think it's been over a month since I did this, but basically I think they were going to fight Israel and Judah, and I think Israel hired the Syrians against them or something like that, and he fought with Hazael. I could be getting this mixed up. But he's wounded in the battle, and so he's going to go to Jezreel right here. Now here's Samaria, the capital, and this is where Jezebel is going to be. Here's Jezreel, where he's going to be, and they're in Ramoth Gilead. So he says, so Jehu said, "If this is your mind, then let no one slip out of the city and go tell this news to Israel." So this is kind of there's a parenthesis here, because they're saying this is what has been going on with Joram in the meantime, and Jehu is saying, if this is in your mind, let no one slip out of the city and tell the news in Jezreel. In other words, In other words, he is saying to his co-conspirators, this garrison here, if we want to go take them out, just don't let it be known. We're going to be super advanced about this, and it's going to be an execution style. We're going to go after him and clean him up. But King Joram had returned to be healed in Jezreel. The wounds would, let's see. So then Jehu mounted his chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there, and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, had come down to visit Joram. So remember, Ahaziah is his brother-in-law. So he's, if you remember Jehoshaphat, the generation before him, Jehoshaphat had married the daughter, he had married his son to the daughter of Ahab, I think it was. So Athaliah was married to this Ahaziah, I believe. And that would make him the brother-in-law to this Joram, who inherits the crown from Ahab. Now, Jehoshaphat's dead, Ahab's dead, and he's going to visit his brother-in-law because they're friendly here. Now the watchman was standing in the tower of Jezreel, and he had spied on the company of Jehu as he came, and he said, I see a company. And Joram said, take a horseman and send to meet him and say, is it peace? So in other words, he's seeing a company of Jehu. It's not just him on his chariot. It's a squadron of men, basically, coming. And they're like, is it peace? Like, what's going on here? They don't know what's going on. So the man on horseback went to meet him, and he said, thus says the king, is it peace? And Jehu says, what have you to do with peace? Turn around and ride behind me. And the watchman reported, saying, the messenger reached them, but he's not coming back. In other words, he's basically telling him, turn around, ride behind me. You're with me now. I'm going to take over this thing. Don't go running back to the king or we'll kill you, basically is what he's saying. So he went to them, and he's not coming back. Then he said on a second horseman who came to them and says, thus says the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, what have you to do with peace? Turn around and ride behind me. In other words, so he's saying, we both know this house is evil. Let's either follow me or you're dead. Then the watchman reported he reached them, but he's not coming back. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives fiercely. So apparently this guy was a beast on a chariot, and everybody knew it. Joram said, make ready, and he went to make ready his chariot. Then Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, set out, and each to his chariot, and went to meet Jehu, and met him at the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. So remember, Naboth the Jezreelite is the guy whose vineyard Jezebel set him up and got him killed and stole his vineyard. And then Joram saw Jehu, and he says, is it peace, Jehu? And he answers, says, what peace can there be so long as harlotries and sorceries of your mother Jezebel are so many? So apparently he's getting a little spiritual and zealous here. Now, he probably was just strictly a soldier, and like, I'm not getting into the politics and religion and all this, but now it's time. Now it's time to have an opinion. And that's how a good soldier would be. You're just like, I'm here to fight. Like, I am not getting into all the drama. I'm just here to fight, right? And they're about their men. They're about taking care of their homeland, defending it. But now God's anointed him. And so he's like, you know what? I don't like all this harlotries and sorceries of Jezebel. Then Joram reigned about and fled and said to Ahaziah, treachery, O Ahaziah. So he's telling his brother-in-law, this is treachery. This is treason. And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between the shoulders so that the arrow pierced his heart. So he's basically turning around to run, and he's shooting him between his shoulder blades, went right straight through to his heart. He was a beast with a bow, too. Jehu said to Bidkar, his aide, take him up and cast him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember when you and I rode side by side behind Ahab his father, and how the Lord uttered this oracle against him. So apparently Jehu was there when the oracle of the Lord was uttered against Ahab for the thing he did with Naboth. He says, as surely as I saw yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his son, says the Lord, I will requite you on this plot of ground. Now therefore take him up and cast him on the plot of ground in accordance with the word of the Lord. So he's literally like, he's apparently been in the cut this whole time, watching this Elijah and Elisha stuff. I wonder if that's the same general that hit all the prophets and stuff. Probably not. That would have been too long ago. But he says, when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled in the direction of Beth Hagan. I don't know where Beth Hagan is. Jehu pursued him and says, shoot him also. And so they shot him in the chariot in the ascent of Gur, which is by Iblim, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. So they're apparently up here. Here's Megiddo. here's Jezreel. So it's somewhere around here. He shoots him and he dies too. So why does he kill him too? Because he is of the house of Ahab and Jezebel. No, I'm sorry. He's the son of Athaliah. I forgot. It's not Athaliah's husband. Athaliah's husband has already died. It's the son of Athaliah. And so he's a direct descendant of Ahab. Remember, he's supposed to clean out the house of Ahab. He says, his servants carried him on a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his tomb with his fathers in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah. So this is where kings can get clunky and it can get hard to understand, because he just killed Ahaziah, and now we're talking about Ahaziah beginning to reign, okay? Remember, these are distinct records from Israel and Judah that the prophets are lacing together into a narrative of what went down, okay? So now he's like, in the 11th year, Joram, the son of Ahab, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah, okay? So Joram, why is he called the son of Ahab? Ahab is because I think Ahab is his grandfather, and he's on the throne because his father had died. Let's go back. I'm sorry. We're going back. So Ahaziah, his father, it just says he died. It doesn't say how he died in battle or whatever, but he's the son of Jehoshaphat. and that's the one who's married to Athaliah, and that's married into the house of Ahab. So it says the 11th year of Joram the son of Ahab, that's the guy they just killed, Ahaziah began to reign over Judah. So I don't know why they say when he reigned, because they said this before, when he reigned. But then he says, when Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out the window. So I don't know why they say he began to reign over Judah right after they kill him. But apparently they're just trying to get you back on track, because you have a big chunk of text that is mostly about Elijah and Elisha. And you have to go all the way back to, I think, 1 Kings 6:16, before or it's like, yeah, so you have to go all the way back to 1 Kings to understand what they're talking about. So they might have just put that in there. So we're back to Judah now. So you understand what's going on in Judah. So he says, when Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out the window. So she's in some. Oh, I'm sorry. She's apparently in Jezreel as well. Jehu entered the gate and says, "Is it peace, you Zimri? Is it peace, you Zimri, murderer of your master?" So she's calling him Zimri, which is the guy who Omri overthrows, because she's found out that she's murdered probably his son, okay? And she lifted up her face to the window and says, "Who is on my side?" Who? 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him, and he said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall of the horses, and they trampled on her. Now remember, this is a foreign queen, okay? This is like let them eat cake, okay? They're like, they don't like her already. She's killed a bunch of prophets. She's basically enforced Baal worship. She's got all these foreign prophets of Phoenicia eating at her table, and the Israelites are treated like second-class citizens, plus all their prophets and priests are getting killed. So they don't like this, okay? Now, Jezebel comes from a family. I actually read this in, I think it was Tatian the Syrian or Theophilus of Antioch. She comes from a family that actually overthrows Hiram's family of Tyre. So I believe the people of Tyre are related to the people of Troy. I don't think they're Sidonians, while Jezebel's family is Sidonians. And they're basically the priesthood of Baal and Asherah, while the kings of Tyre, Hiram and those guys, these were like the only guys the Danites and the Asherites didn't overthrow because they weren't Canaanites. And what I'm doing in my research is I'm finding out that the Danites and the Asherites, mostly the Danites, sail with these guys, and they basically set up a colony near Troy called Dardana, which is literally just means the settlement of Dan. And then with Tyre as their partners, they're also going down to Peloponnese, and you have the Tyrians, and you have the Lacedaemonians, or the Spartans, who descend from King Danos. And it looks like that the Danites are setting up cities, and you actually have this in Manethos, Egypt, or I'm sorry, in this people called the Danan, who set up Knossos in Crete, which is where King Minos and the Minotaur and all that is, and I believe that's Samson's dad. And then they set up colonies. It looks like they either mix in with or establish the Spartans and the Argives, which are in Peloponnese. And this is where your myths of the Minotaur bull and Hercules and Perseus all come from. They're all Samson. I believe they're all Samson. And this is just the Greeks writing this stuff down hundreds of years later when they finally get an alphabetic script. And they're just mixing and jumbling myths and legends together. But so anyways, this is the point. This is why Tyre is so friendly with David, is because he has been in league. The royal families of Tyre have been in league with the Danites for years. Well, they're eventually going to get overthrown and killed by the family of Jezebel, and then it's going to be Jezebel's aunt that goes and starts the Phoenician city of Carthage. And over in Carthage, they're practicing like child sacrifice and all the stuff that the Carthaginians or that the Sidonians are doing. So Carthage and Sidon are related. Tyre and Troy are related, and that would put them in relation somewhat to Rome. Rome is going to be a mixture of people from Tarshish, so like the Etruscans, the Sardinians, the Sicilians. Tarshish is going to be the Iberians in Spain, and also the people who originally settled England. They're all going to be related, but they're going to mix with Danites and Tyrians, and you're going to find these people right across the Adriatic Sea, and they call the Tyrians or Tyrrhenians is what the Greeks call the Etruscans. And so they have the Tyrrhenian Sea on one side of Italy, and on the other side of Italy, you have the Adriatic Sea, and then just on the other side of this, you have another group of people called the Dardanoi, which I believe are just exiles or refugees from Troy when Troy fell, and then right by them, the Tyrrhenians, which I believe are exiles from Troy. So these guys seem to be get together all over the Mediterranean, and that's why they're so friendly with David's kingdom, because it seems like if you get put all the pieces together, they're the ones who shipped Samson out of town to Crete when he was after he killed 1,000 Philistines, and he's going to be out there basically helping them and the Greeks overthrow Crete and the Philistines and all that stuff all over the Mediterranean for about 20 years, and then he's going to come back and have his fling with Delilah. So that's all stuff that's going to be going in my Serpent in the Way book once I finalize my research. But the point is Jezebel comes from a family that's no good. She's from a family that overthrew the royal line of Tyre, and that's why she's here in the first place. And now she's married in with a family who overthrew a guy, and she has the nerve to say, "Is it peace, Zimri, you murderer of your master?" when she comes from those kind of lines herself, and she's just a murderer. So he lifted up his face to the window and says who's on the side, and these eunuchs were just like, "We don't like this bee anyways." So they threw her down, and the dogs ate her bones. It says when they went, it said, and he went and then he went and ate and drank, and he said, "See now to this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter." Okay? So he throws her down, and it says her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled on her. Okay? Even the horses didn't like this woman. And he said, "She's cursed, but go bury her because she's a king's daughter." Give her some grace, I guess. This is the kind of stuff you just do because it's like we don't want to incur war with these people, okay, over how we mistreated this person or anger God or whatever. So then he says they went to bury her and they found her no more than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. So the dogs literally just mauled her and ate everything, face off, everything. And then when they came back and told him, he said, "This is the word of Jezebel, which he spoke by Elijah the Tishbite, the territory of Jezreel. The dog shall eat the flesh of Jezebel. And the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung in the face of the field of the territory of Jezreel, so no one can say this is Jezebel." So he's like, he remembers. So he's apparently attentive to the words of the prophet. So he's a relatively good guy. I want you to understand, in the world they live in, they're all still, they've got these golden cash and Dan and Bethel. But he apparently doesn't like the Baal worship, and he's attentive to the words of Elisha, and he's been rolling tight with Ahab and his son. So he's been watching this stuff, and he's like, we're getting rid of this crap. This has not gone good for us. He's been seeing all the crap that's been happening to their nation since this has happened. He's like, this is not good. So he says, now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, so Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of the city, and to the elders, and to the guardians of the son of Ahab, saying, now then, as soon as this letter comes to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and they are with you chariots and horses, fortified cities, also in weapons, select the best fittest of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. So he's like, I challenge you to single combat, biatch. And then he says, but they were exceedingly afraid and said, behold, the two kings could not stand before him. How could we stand? So in other words, these kings had troops with them. They had peeps, and they're both dead. So we're not going to mess with him. So he who was over the palace and he who was over the city, together with the brothers and the guardians, sent to Jehu, said, we are your servants, and we will do what you bid us. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever is good in your eyes. In other words, we are not going to try to set up a counter monarchy to you and have a civil war. We're not trying to die. So then he wrote them a second letter saying, if you are on my side and if you are ready to obey me, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me at Jezreel tomorrow at this time. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were the great men of the city who were bringing them up. So he basically, remember, Samaria is established, I think it's by Omri. might be by Ahab, but I think it's by Omri, his father. So his sons pretty much run this city. They're probably all the merchant class. They're probably all the administrative class. They're the bosses. And he's like, well, just cut off all their heads and bring them to me in Jezreel, and we'll have peace. How's that sound? And so he said, when the letter came to them, they took the king's sons, they slew them, 70 persons, and put their heads in the basket and sent them to Jezreel. They said, sorry about your luck, boys, but it's either you or us, and it ain't us. When the messenger came and told him they have brought the heads of the king's sons, they said, lay them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. I got to count these heads. Then in the morning, when they went out, he stood and said to all the people, you are innocent. It is I who conspired against my master and slew him. But who struck down all of these? I love it. He orders their heads given to him, and in the morning he goes and stands down and he said, I conspired and killed my master, but who struck down all these? He played dumb, like he didn't know why this happened. And he said, now then, that there shall fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord which is spoke concerning the house of Ahab, for the Lord has done what he said by Elijah. So he's anointed by a prophet. He's not calling that out. He's saying, I just did what the Lord spoke was going to happen by Elijah. And everybody knows Elijah, right? I mean, they had a drought, and they had the fiery contest and all that stuff with Baal's priests and all this stuff. So he's going, Elijah, I'm just fulfilling the words that God spoke through Elijah. So Jehu slew all that remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, all his familiar friends, and his priests, and he left none of them remaining. So he didn't just kill the 70 sons. He's like, your entire administration plus all the priests that Jezebel put in power. Then he set out and went to Samaria, and on the way he was at Betheked of the shepherds, and Jehu met a kinsman of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and he said, who are you? And they answered, we are the kinsmen of Ahaziah, and we came down to visit the royal princes and the sons of the queen's mother. Okay? So, remember, Ahaziah is a grandson of Ahab, which means all his kinsmen are also grandchildren of Ahab. He's called to wipe out the house of Ahab. Okay? These are probably all the sons and potentially grandchildren of Athaliah. Athaliah is kind of the queen mother right now. That's why they're saying the sons of the queen mother. Okay? We came down to visit the royal princes and the sons of the queen mother. So they were on their way to visit their cousins, and it's not going to go well for them. And he said, take them alive. And they took them alive and slew them in the pit of Betheked, 42 persons, and he spared none of them. Remember that these guys have multiple wives and concubines and lots of sons and stuff like this. And this is what royalty does. They just hang out with their cousins, the princes, and they drink and sleep with girls and have a good time. I mean, what else are you going to do? Your dad's the king, and you're royalty, and you might manage some stuff, but you're mostly just having a good time, just like the Saudi royals do. And so he said, so he kills 42 more. So he's killed 100 and, what are we up to? 112 sons of Ahab plus priests plus, friends and administrators. And then he departed from there, and he met Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. And he greeted him, and he said to him, is your heart true to my heart as mine is to yours? And Jehonadab answered, it is. And Jehu said, if it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand. Jehu took him up in the chariot. So the Rechabites are going to be a people who are noted for not drinking, and they're not going to, they live in tents. And I think they might be descended from Moses's in-laws, but they're going to be mentioned in the days of Jeremiah, the sons of Rechab. So this is Rahab, and Jehonadab is apparently a son of that first generation. And he said, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride his chariot. So these people are known for being righteous. They dwell in tents, not in the cities, because they don't want to get involved with drama in the cities. And when they came to Samaria, he slew all that remained to Ahab in Samaria till he had wiped them out according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Elijah. And Jehu assembled all the people and said to him, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. What is he doing? This is a setup. Okay, it's not a face-off, it's a setup. And so now therefore call to me the prophets of Baal and all his worshippers and priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. So he's like, I'm going to serve Baal. Like, we're going to offer a big sacrifice to him. So make sure every last priest of Baal is there, or it's their life. Okay? It's going to be their life if they show up. So Jehu ordered, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal, so they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent all throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. He said to him who was in charge of the wardrobe, bring out the vestments of the worshippers of Baal. And he brought out the vestments for them. And then Jehu went in the house of Baal, and Jehonadab and the son of Ahab. And he said to the worshippers of Baal, search and see that there is no servant of the Lord here among you, only worshippers of Baal. So he's like, anyone who really serves Yahweh, get out of here. Then he went to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and said, the man that allows any of those who I give into the hands of who I give into your hands to escape shall forfeit his life. In other words, when they come running out of the temple, you better kill them, or it's your head. Okay, it's your behind, Mr. Postman. So as soon as he had made an end of the offering of the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and the officers, go and slay them, let not a man escape. And when they put to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out and went in the inner room of the house of Baal, and they brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burned it. So I don't know what the pillar is that's in the house of Baal. This might be, what they call an Asherah pole. There have been a lot of talk about Asherah poles being phalluses or being like obelisks, which are also phalluses. There's a lot of phallus cult stuff in the Near East that I'm finding, but what I am not finding is that obelisks are necessarily meant to be phalluses. The cult of Osiris and the whole story about Isis putting Cyrus back together and finding everything except for his dong, I think that emerged later. I think those are later Egyptian mysteries. And what obelisks seem to be meant to represent are rays of the sun, because the sun god is the original OG. It's like the corruption of Yahweh. So if you understand this is why Nimrod takes on the sun god. Until Baal and the storm god comes in, because Yahweh shows up to Job in the storm, people are worshiping what they believe is the visible God, if you will, as the sun. This is why the Apis bull is going to have the sun on its head. The bull is going to represent the bull of heaven, which is just a replacement for the Father. The serpent that comes out of his head is a replacement for the Holy Spirit. And the sun is going to be the replacement for Yahweh. And the reason this goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, is because Jesus, when he was walking in the Garden of Eden, he would walk with them in the cool of the evening, and in the daytime, the sun would be out. So they equate, because he would have been light and shining and stuff like this, the sun would go down, and then they'd see him walk in the cool of the evening, and men started to believe that he was the actual physical sun. And the first god is this Utu that seems to be basically this god of the sun, who is also will see your secret sins and come judge you. That's who he was. And one of his titles was the judge of the way. Does that sound like Jesus? The judge of the way. That was his title. So he's that, and then that's what the Sumerians call him Utu, and then the Akkadians or the Amorites, one of the two, are going to merge him with Shem and call him Shamash. So Shamash replaces Utu. Well, the Egyptians are going to call him Ammon. And Ammon is going to be, they believe it's based on Ham. It's just Ham. Ammon is Ham. And so because Ham is going to be their long-lived 600-year-old forefather, from whom they call him Menes. In Canaan, they call him Mizor. In Egypt, they call him Menes. The Hebrews call the Egyptians Misraim. So if you look at this, it's Mizor Aim. The Aim is a plural. That's why you see the Danites called the Danaim. Okay? The Mizraim are the Mizor Aim. And so the Canaanite name for Mizor is probably accurate to the Hebrews, but the Egyptians call him Menes. Okay? And Manetho writes this all in his history. And he's the first king of Egypt. Ammon, or Ham, is their forefather god, because this is what all they're doing. Marduk is the forefather of the Amorites. I forget what all their names are, but a bunch of these gods are just like named after the forefather. Asher in Assyria, it's just they're taking depictions of Nimrod with a guy with a bow, and they're just calling it Asher, and they're saying that's our god because it's just ancestor worship. So the point is, this sun god, as the god who judges, has been around Egypt for a while. And the Apis bull is one of the first kinds of trinities. And I'm going to get into all this in my Sermon by the Way book, but you have all different kinds of trinities triads that are either three men, father, son, and a woman, or like the Apis bull where you have a 3 and 1. These triads keep appearing because what these are corruptions of the true Godhead. They're not just made up gods from thin air. And so these guys are worshiping this bull calf, and the bull calf has a sun disk in his head. Now, how did I get into all that? The point is the obelisks are rays of the sun. They're not penises. What are Asherah poles? We don't know because they're made of wood, so we don't have any. Okay? So what the Asherah poles are suspected to be are trees that are carved in the shape of gods. So we don't know. There's these depictions of stuff that people think might be an Asherah pole. Baal or Zeus or any of these guys, Baal is the same as Zeus. He's often associated with an oak tree, and so what they think an Asherah pole might be is something like this, where you have a tree that's still planted and then they just cut off all its leaves and stuff and they carve it into something. That's what they think an Asherah pole is. They don't know, but there's some kind of pillar. What is that? We don't know. We're just guessing. But whatever it is, that's what they have in there for Baal. Now, Baal seems to be a guy with like a bowling pin on his head, so he's kind of penis looking. And maybe that's where they get it from. But it says there's a pillar in the house of Baal, and they pull it out and they burn it. And they demolish the pillar of Baal, and they demolish the house of Baal, and made a latrine to this day. So this is a public restroom. If you remember how they have bathhouses and stuff, this would be a public place where you go take a dump. And maybe that dump is like turned to fertilizer later, or maybe it's attached to some kind of aqueduct so that flows out into the fields or whatever. They're basically like, we are turning your temple into a poop shed. How do you like me now? So Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. Jehu's being a boss when it comes to getting rid of false worship. But Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin, the golden calves that were in Bethel and Dan. So he kept the golden calves. If he wanted to do right, he would be like, okay, let's all go back to worshiping at the temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem the way we were supposed to according to the law of Moses. Unfortunately, he just killed the royal house of Judah, so he's not about to be like, let's go up to Jerusalem and worship, okay? He just killed the royal house of Judah. I mean, he wiped them out too. He has taken out basically the king of Judah, the king of Israel, all the royal line of Israel, and all the adult royal line of Judah. So when Athaliah is going to kill everybody, these are mostly kids she's killing, because he's already killed the adults, okay? They're younglings. She's killing younglings like Anakin Skywalker. So the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my eyes, and have done so to the house of Ahab according to what is in my heart, your sons of the 4th generation shall sit on the house of Israel. So God has secured his line for 4 generations in the house of Israel. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel to sin. So why is it only 4 generations? Because he kept the original corruption that made it fall apart in the first place. And within a few generations, they're going to go to crap too. So he said, in those days, the Lord began to cut off parts of Israel. Hazael defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, and from Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aurora, which is by the valley of Arnon, which is Gilead of Bashan. So he's saying he's defeating them. So essentially, remember, he comes from Ramoth Gilead. Him and his men who just took over Israel were the outer defense for Israel. And when they come in here and take over this, Aram just comes in there and kicks butt all over the territory they just left. This is Gilead, the Gadites, the Reubenites, the Manassites, Gilead, and Bashan. This is this whole region that he was supposed to be guarding. So that didn't work out as well as we would hope. Well, maybe if you had destroyed those 2 calves too, the Lord would have been like, and now go kick the crap out of Aram. But he didn't. He went so close to purging Israel of all of its idolatry, but he didn't. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu and all that he did and all his might, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? We don't know. We don't have those books, but we'll assume yes. So Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Jehoahaz, his son, reigned in his stead. The time that Jehu reigned over Israel was 28 years. So he's probably like, I would guess, a man in his prime when he starts. Because he's rolling with the king, which means he's basically commanding a troop. He's like a David. And he reigns for 28 years after that. That's a good solid long reign. Now, back to Judah. Meanwhile, at the Batcave, now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed the royal family. Remember, she's obviously realizing that the house of Ahab is getting wiped out. Her mother's been wiped out. All of her nephews and her sons are being wiped out, and their brothers, their half brothers and stuff like that. Okay, and so she's like, it's on then. And so she's like, she goes after everyone in the royal family. Now, she's got to have a ton of power to be able to pull this off, because these guys aren't poor. They are not without relatives. She's got to have some pretty absolute power in Israel to go have all of the sons of David killed. But she does, down to one. But Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, she's also a daughter of Ahab, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were about to be slain. And she put him in and his nurse in the bedchamber. Thus she hid him from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. So most of the house of David's been killed already. This is like Game of Thrones Red Wedding stuff, okay? What it's mostly down to is the younglings. And she wipes out the younglings. She wipes them out. But this is not some random nursemaid. This is actually Jehoshaphat, the daughter of Joram, the sister of Ahaziah. Which means this would be probably her own daughter, but by a different... I'm sorry. Joram is her son. And this is his... Joram was her husband, and Ahaziah was her son. So this is probably his sister by another mother. That's probably who it is. So she takes Ahaziah, Joash, the son of Ahaziah, steals him away. So this is his auntie. Steals him away when he's about to be slain, and put him in the nurse in the bedchamber. Thus she hid from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. And he remained with her 6 years, hid in the house of the Lord, while Athaliah reigned in the land. So she's hiding him in the temple for 6 years, this little baby. But in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought the captains of the Karites and the guards. I think the Karites are these temple guards, I think. And they had them come into the house of the Lord, and they made a covenant with them to put them under the oath in the house of the Lord, and they showed them king's son. So first they swore them all to secrecy, and then there's still a king's son remaining. 6 years. Imagine. You guys think COVID is bad? This woman, this last descendant of Jezebel and Ahab, has just wiped out the whole royal family. Jehu's wiped out most of them, and she's wiped out all the rest. And you're like reigning under Darth Palpatine, only it's abroad. And she's the worst. And the priesthood is just like, ooh, we've got this kid hidden. And he commanded them, this is the thing you should do. 1/3 of you, those who come off duty on the Sabbath to guard the king's house, another third being at the guard's sure, and a third at the gate behind the guards shall guard the palace. And the 2 divisions of you which come on duty in force on the Sabbath to guard the house of the Lord shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand, and whoever approaches the ranks is to be slain. Be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in. So they've got this kid, this 7-year-old kid, and they're like, here is the deal. We're going to announce that he's the legit king because he is the legit heir to the throne. And Athaliah has killed every other one. And you guys are going to kill anyone who tries to get near him. And they're going to set up guards. Remember, these would be like temple guards, because you have all these people coming to the temple for these festivals and stuff like this. And so you need to keep order in the temple complex, and especially when the royals are around. And this is what they are. They're kind of a royal guard / temple guard. Remember, the temple is right up in, not that far away from the royal palace. And so they're right up the street from the royal palace, and they've got the true heir to the throne hidden there. And it says, the captains did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and each brought his men who were off to the company. And each brought his men who were to go off duty on the Sabbath, and those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest delivered to the captains the spears and shields that have been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. So they're taking David's own, like kind of like how David took Goliath's sword or whatever. These are probably from like David and his mighty men. And so they're like kept in the temple as like, memorandum. And they're like, take these. And the guards stood, every man with his weapon in his hand, from the south side of the house to the north side of the house, around the altar of the house. And he brought out the king's son and put the crown upon him and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, long live the king. They just crowned a 7-year-old. When Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of all the people, she went in the house of the Lord to the people. And when she looked, there was a king standing by the pillar, according to the customs of the captains and the trumpeters, besides the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. And Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, treason, treason. I love how these super evil people are so quick to be like, what you're doing is illegal and immoral. Then Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains who were of the army and said, bring her out between the ranks and slay her with a sword and anyone who follows her. For the priest said, let her not be slain in the house of the Lord. And so they laid hands on her and went through the horses' entrance to the king's house, and there she was slain. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and his people, that they should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. And all the people, so this is Jehoiada the priest. This is going to be important, because this kid, when he grows up, he's going to kill this guy's son. These people are so awful. Then the people of the land went out to the house of Baal and tore it down. His altars and images they broke into pieces. So apparently she set up a house of Baal too. And they slew Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priest posted watchmen over the house of the Lord. It's like a time to have a little revival here in Judah. And he took the captains, the Carites, and the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the gate of the guards to the king's house. And he took his seat in the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been slain with a sword in the king's house. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. We have a 7-year-old king. He might be a Padawan, but he survived the killings of Anakin against the youngling, so he is the Jedi Master now. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And Jehoash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all his days, because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, and the people continued to sacrifice and burn incense in the high places. You want to have these things ringing in your ears as you're reading Kings. You keep hearing about northern Israel. Nevertheless, they didn't take down those stupid bull calves, those stupid Apis bulls that they were worshiping. They were basically Egyptian gods. Nevertheless, these guys still continued to burn incense and sacrifice in the high places, which were the worship spots of the Canaanites before them. There's still the original corruption. And this is so important, because as you get into church history and all this stuff, well, let's go all the way back to Nicaea. No, Nicaea was so corrupt. They were trying to push celibacy at Nicaea. They were mixing in basically Gnosticism at Nicaea. No, we don't go back to Nicaea. We don't go back to the early church fathers. We go back to the apostles and the apostles alone. Those little bits of corruption that are still in all the Protestant churches are the reason why the Protestants are going Christian nationalists right now, which is essentially the same as the original Roman Catholics. It's the same. It's the same doctrine. It's the same wanting to be part of the state. It's the same trying to bring out the kingdom by your own strength, and it's going to turn to violence just like it did back then. You have to clear this thing down to the foundation. The foundation's good, but clear out all that misbuilt crap. So, he said, the people continued to sacrifice and burn incense in the high places. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the holy things which is brought in the house of the Lord, the money for which a man is assessed, so in other words, this is personal income tax, the money from the assessment of persons, the money which a man's heart prompts him to bring to the house of the Lord, let the priests take, each from his acquaintance, and let them repair the house wherever any needs of repair be discovered. So we're going to refurbish the house of the Lord. This thing has not had a makeover since Solomon. We need to clean this mow up. But in the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priests had made no repairs of the house. What the heck? Therefore King Joash summoned Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, why are you not repairing the house? Now therefore take no more money from your acquaintances, but hand it over for the repair of the house. For the priests agreed that they should take no more money from the people, that they should not repair the house. Why? So then Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in the lid of it and set it beside the altar on the right side as one end of the house of the Lord. And the priests who guarded the threshold put in it all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. So when you see the old woman giving her mites, and Jesus is mentioning this, this is where this tradition starts. This is the temple tax. This is how we keep the house of the Lord in good repair. Okay, we don't remember Solomon and David built that with their wealth, but how's it going to be maintained? So this is the origin of the temple tax. He basically took a chest and he put a hole in it, and this is how we have these little offering boxes. This is where it all comes from. And whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest came up and they counted it and tied the bags of money that was found in the house of the Lord. Then they would give the money that was weighed out to the hands of workmen who had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they paid it out to the carpenters and builders who worked in the house of the Lord, and to the masons and the stone cutters, as well as to buy timber and quarried stone, making repairs for the house of the Lord, and for any outlay on the repairs of the house. Why? They've been raided before. I mean, Egypt totally came in there and pillaged the stuff. They probably did some damage to the house of the Lord back then. And there were not made for the house of the Lord basins of silver, snuffers, bowls, trumpets, or any vessels of gold or silver from the money. Oh, but they were not made from any of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord, for that was given to the workmen who were repairing the house of the Lord with it. And they did not ask an accounting for the men whose hand they delivered the money to pay for the workmen, for they dealt honestly. The money from the guilt offerings, the money from the sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. At that time, Hazael, king of Assyria, went up and fought against Gath. So this is the Judahite territory, but it's Philistine, and took it. But when Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem, Jehoash, king of Judah, took all the votive gifts that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah his fathers and the kings of Judah had dedicated to his own votive gifts, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and sent these to Hazael, king of Syria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. So he basically bought him off. So he sacks Gath. I like how you have this nice little road here, right to Gath from Damascus. Oh, turns out this is the right map that's describing what's happened. Land seized by Aram during Ahab's reign. So they haven't just attacked all this; they've seized it. They've seized the whole Bashan region. They don't have Dan, but they have Bashan, which was controlled by the Manassites, and this territory, which would have been Reubenites and probably Gadites. And so they have shrunk Israel quite a bit. Because Israel, if you remember, controlled all the way up to Damascus in the days of David. Then they would have controlled this Bashan region. Now they don't even control that. And he goes and takes Gath. So it is not going well for Israel. They're losing ground to Ahab. They're having civil war. They're having their royal lines wiped out. They're not doing well. And the Lord keeps hinting why. Remember that original thing I told you not to do, but you keep doing? He keeps hinting why throughout this book, which makes it sound like people are aware of what they're doing wrong, but they're not doing anything about it. Like, we know our churches are basically movie theaters, and we know God never taught the New Testament to tithe, but let's keep doing it anyways. It's like, why? We all know that's not biblical. Why do we keep doing it? Why do we keep doing it? Because it makes for good showmanship, and our churches grow because of it. Yeah, grow full of shallow people who don't know the Lord. They don't read his word. They don't walk according to what he commands, but they put on a good show. And you can all meet in the dark and watch the show and not know each other. Great. Maybe we should stop doing that. Nope. We can't stop making the church a theater. It's been a theater since Whitefield. All the best preachers we've known. I mean, Spurgeon and Finney and Whitefield, they're all basically theater guys. Like we like just having a guy come up and give a good speech, and then we're just like, that was a good message, and not really change. No. Change. Wipe it back down to the foundation. We don't need anything but the Bible, and we can sing a cappella, and let's obey the Bible, and let's actually do what it says. That's boring, though. We've come a long way since those times, and so has Israel. They came a long way since those times when they were just obeying the law of Moses, haven't they? How are they doing? Things are falling apart. How's the church doing? Things are falling apart. I'm starting to pick up a pattern here. Now, the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? We'll find out after the demolition of Jerusalem. His servants arose and made a conspiracy. Listen to this. They don't even say why. This is apparently in Chronicles. His servants arose and made a conspiracy and slew Joash in the house of Millo on the way that goes down to Silla. It was Josachar the son of Shimeath and Jehozabad the son of Shomer, his servants, who struck him down, and so that he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the land of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his stead. What's that about? Well, you read this in 2 Chronicles, and what happens is, when he gets older, the son of the priest who had counseled him from his infancy, who had protected him from his infancy and counseled him from then, is going to go and he's going to prophesy against him for something that he does that the Lord's not pleased with, and he kills that guy. And so they're just like, you know what? We're killing him. They didn't like that, so they killed him, and they put his son on the throne instead. So the priests will kill the king every now and again, but they're not going to try to take over his throne. They're going to put his son on instead. In the 23rd year of Joash the son of Ahaziah the king of Judah, Jehoaz the son of Jehu began to reign in Israel. In Samaria he reigned 17 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin, and he did not depart from them. So when God is not tearing down Jehu for this, this is called discipline. This is called the chastening of the Lord. He's not getting the message. His son obviously is not getting the message. God is trying to make it really obvious. Don't think that there's not prophets that are saying something, because they got prophets all over the place, and they're surely saying something, okay? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them continually into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, okay? See? I didn't even read that. I'm just like, this is what God does. And it's like, there you go. This is what God does. He's chasing you because you won't get rid of these stupid idols. These things have been around from the get. And you guys still haven't figured this out yet. Then Jehoaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, how the king of Israel oppressed him. So they're still not getting rid of these idols for the same original reason that Jeroboam put them up in the first place. We don't want our people going up to Jerusalem to worship. We think our kingdom will fall apart if they do. No, your kingdom will fall apart if you don't. Can't you see what's happening? They don't care. They won't listen. Therefore the Lord gave Israel a savior. Okay, so Jehoaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened him, for he saw the oppression of Israel and how the king of Israel oppressed them. So he's chastening him. He's not trying to utterly destroy him. He's trying to chasten him, and then they cry out to the Lord, and he forgives him. Now, imagine that somewhere along this time is like, maybe we should get rid of the golden calves now. And they're like, no, the golden calves stay. We're like that ourselves. I have to admit I'm like that myself. I'll have my sins and my things that I should change and I don't. And then I have a bad day, and then I pray to the Lord, and the Lord forgives me. And I go right back to the thing. This is us. This is why we need a Savior and a brand new nature. But the reality is our flesh is just like, if God would really want me to stop doing that thing, he would kill me. And then we're just like, is that really how you want this to go? When he chastens you and gives you grace, you're like, oh, just go back to my bad attitude or whatever, right? Like, this is how we are. We're not good by ourselves. So God gave Israel a savior. And he said, nevertheless, they did not part from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel sin, but walked in them. And the Asherah also remained in Samaria. So they got rid of the Baals, but not the Asherah. What are the Asherah? Well, they're probably like idols of Ashtoreth, I would imagine. For there was not left to Jehoaz an army of more than 50 horsemen and 10 chariots and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them and made them like dust at the threshing. Now remember how big their armies are when they start. When they enter into Israel, they got like a standing army of 600,000. When they split Israel and Judah, they still, when Judah was united, they had like 1.1 to 1.3 million in the army. When Israel and Judah split, northern Israel still has like 500K in the army. It has gotten so bad, they're down to 10,000 footmen, 50 horsemen, and 10 chariots. So you're looking at 11,000 in your entire army. That's how bad it's gotten. So their army has been decimated. They're like 1/50th of what they were when they started. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoaz and all that he did and all his might, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehoaz slept with his fathers and buried him in Samaria, and Joash and his son reigned in his stead. So I want you to understand how bad this is when their armies are that small. Okay? When you read the stories about David going into Edom and they killed all the men, right? They killed all the men. They killed all the boys. They only left some women alive and took them slaves. That's what their enemies are doing to them too. Don't think they're like, we're more civil than that. No, no, no. They're less civil than that. So the reason their armies are so small is because these guys aren't just taking territory. They're taking territory and they're killing all the men. And they're taking the women as second wives and stuff. Or selling them as slaves. That's what they're doing. And then they're moving in. All right, these are Aramean territories. Now let's move into some Arameans. In the 37th year of Jehoash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoaz, began, this is really confusing, began to reign in Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. So this is going to be the third generation from Jehu. Remember, it's prophesied that he lasts 4 generations. So it's in the 37th year of Jehoash, or Joash. He's still alive. They haven't assassinated him yet. And we're on generation 3 of Jehu. So when we were on Jehu, remember, Joash was a little baby. Okay? And now he's in the 37th year of his reign, which started when he was 7, so it's 43 years later, and we're already on the 3rd generation of rulers from Jehu. And he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin, but he walked in them. Now the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, and the might with which he fought against Amaziah the king of Judah, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So we'll read about that when we get to Chronicles. But apparently they got in a fight, and I believe he actually wins. Because he says the might which he fought against the king of Azariah. I believe Amaziah puts down a rebellion in Moab or something like that. And he's getting uppity because he had just had a victory. So he tries to step up to him. And he's like, why don't you just take your victory and go home? And he doesn't, so he kicks his butt. And I think they pillaged some stuff from Jerusalem. So this is Amaziah, the son of Joash, who gets assassinated. Then Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat on his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Now when Elisha had fallen sick with the illness that he was about to die, look how long Elisha is involved with this. Elijah and Elisha are involved with so much of what's going on here. Elisha has been around since Ahab, okay? Jehu's son, Jehu's grandson. That's 4 kings he's been around for. And this is how these prophets are. These are these guys who get the word of the Lord, probably coming on them when they're like a teenager or something like that. And then they live till they're like 80, and they've seen 4 kings come and go. This is why they get books like this, where they know what's going down, okay? So here's now Elisha just finally getting sick in the days of, he sets up Jeroboam. Remember, he was probably a young man, probably a teenager or something like that, when he starts following Elijah. And then Elijah goes up, and Elijah is mostly, we don't hear about him until Ahab and Jezebel start, but Elisha's there almost the entire time. Because all the stuff with Elijah is going to go on for just a few years. And then Elisha's going to inherit his mantle. And Elisha's going to be around for Ahab, Jezebel, and apparently 3 generations of northern Israel. Now he's fallen sick with illness, which he was about to die. And Joash, the king of Israel, went down to him and wept before him, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. Now think of this. Elisha sent the guy to go anoint their grandfather to be the king in the first place. So even though the line of Jehu ultimately fails, compared to what they were raised around in Israel, they're pretty solid dudes. They are considering the words of Elijah and Elisha. And they're following them. And they love Elijah and Elisha, okay? So it's going to be in his son's generation. That's that 4th generation. That's Jeroboam II, when the other prophets start. And so Elisha said to him, take the bow and arrows. And he took the bow and arrows. And then he said to king in Israel, draw the bow. And he drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. Now listen to this. They're getting their butts kicked all over Kingdom Come by the Arameans. They're down to 10,000 men. And this is Elisha's last deed before he dies. And he said, open the window eastward. And he opened it. And Elijah said, shoot. And he shot. The Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria. For you shall fight the Assyrians in Aphek until you have made the end of them. Okay, so he's already telling him, you're going to shoot this bow, and what you do shooting this bow represents your victories over the Arameans. And he said, take the arrows, and he took them, and he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them, and he struck 3 times, and then he stopped. And then the man of God was angry with him. Remember, he's already told you, these arrows are symbolizing your victories over these people. And he's like, now strike the ground with them. And he's like, how many victories do you want over these people? He just gives him like this magical boon, which is like, how many victories do you want over these people? Strike the ground. He strikes him 3 times and he stops. And the man of God was angry with him. He said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. And then you would have struck down Syria until you had made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 6 times. So the prophets will do weird things like this. Like this guy will be like, punch me in the face. I'm like, I'm not going to punch you in the face. And he gets eaten by a lion, right? Next guy's like, punch you in the face. And he's like, on it. Whoosh. He's not trying to get eaten by a lion, right? The prophets will do this weird stuff. Why? I don't know. Take the prophet seriously. That is the lesson. So Elisha died and they buried him. Now bands of Moabites used to invade the land in the spring of the year. And as the man was being buried, lo, a marauding band was seen in the land and cast into the grave of Elisha. And was seen, and the man was cast into the grave of Elisha. Okay? So in other words, these marauders are coming, and this guy was going to be buried, and we don't have time to bury him because these marauders are coming. So they just tossed him into Elisha's grave. And as soon as the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. Now Hazael, the son of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. Okay? So this is the last miracle Elisha does. After he's dead, his bones, you see the Christ type here? His death brings life to another man after he's dead. Why? He's a Christ type. That's why. Elijah is a type of the law. Elisha is the type of Christ in the New Covenant. Most of his miracles are restorative. Most of Elijah's miracles are judgment. Now Hazael, the king of Assyria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz, and the Lord was gracious to them, and he had compassion on them, and he turned toward them because of the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, nor has he cast them from his presence until now. When Hazael, the king of Assyria, died, Ben-Hadad, his son, became king in his stead. So in Syria, when they say Syria here, you want to understand this. When they say Syria, it's really Aram, okay? There is no country called Syria until you get into this country that's getting overthrown right now, okay? What you have is Assyria, and Assyria is way up in Nineveh. But by the time you get to the Greeks, they call the entire region between Philistia and Assyria Syro-Palestina. Okay, it's short for basically from Assyria to Palestine. Okay, and because of that, the Romans are going to break it up into provinces and call one Palestine and one Syria. Okay, but it had a bunch of different names between then and then. They called it Soel Syria, which is essentially it's basically from the river to Phoenicia, essentially. From the Euphrates River, but it was like the pit or the gap of Syria or something like that. But when you go to the Old Testament in the Hebrew, it's going to say Aram. These are the Arameans. This is important. They call him Hazael, king of Aram. Now, I don't think he's ruling over all the Arameans because the Arameans are all the way up into Mesopotamia. Okay, I think he's ruling over the Arameans in the region from Damascus. But these kings, if you go back, their names are Hazael and Ben-Hadad. Okay? This is important. This Hadad comes from Baal-Hadad. So you're going to see son of Hadad is another name for Baal. And I believe it comes from an original Hadad who was an Edomite, who would have been a couple kings after Job, because in Job's day, that's when Yahweh comes. And I think the name Baal just means Lord or Master, and Hadad means like the striker. And he's meant to be the lightning striker or thunder striker. So his name is son of Hadad, and Hazael, I don't know exactly what that means. Oh, God has seen. El. So you see El and Hadad, you see the gods' names attached. So I want you to see this with the Arameans, because the Arameans are originally following Elohim. And Hadad, in their what they do in their cosmology, Baal or Baal-Hadad is considered the son of El. He's like a replacement for Jesus. And El is Elohim. That's the Father. Okay? Goes all the way back to Enlil and Utu. The storm god eventually replaces the sun god as the go-to god. And then he becomes Zeus. And Zeus is just the Proto-Indo-European name is Deus or Zeus or Zeus or Theus. That's their just generic name for God. It literally means, I believe it means the heavens or something like that, of the heavens or something like that. And so like I looked at these words for their God, and it literally translates to Heavenly Father. And because people, your secular academics don't know that the word for sky and the word for heavens is the same word in most of these old languages, they would take this Heavenly Father and they'd be like, oh, that's Sky Father. He sits on a cloud and shoots lightning down. Kind of, but what they're doing is they're taking Heavenly Father, which is literally Heavenly Father, and then they're taking this corruption of Yahweh, which is Bel-Hadad, and they're making them father and son. And so what you see in this Aramaean kingdom is you have the fathers going back and forth named Ben-Hadad, the son Hadad, okay? So he's not named because Ben-Hadad is his name, okay? He's not named, Ben normally means the son, but it's like the father is El, the son is Hadad. So Kaza, I'm not sure where that comes from, but it means has seen, Kaza El, seen of God, and Ben-Hadad is the son Hadad. So it's like it's their corrupted version of the father and the son. And they consider themselves good guys. And the Israelites were marrying in with these people for a while, at least the Manassites were, probably because their distant relatives, going back to Nahor and Laban and all those guys, were probably married in with them up in Haran, that's Aramaean territory too. So Jehoash the son of Jehoaz took again out of the hand of Ben-Hadad the son of Hazael the cities which were taken out of the hand of Jehoaz his father by war. 3 times Joash beat him and recovered the city of Israel. It was like if you had hit him 6 times, you would have totally taken him out all the way up to Damascus, but instead you just took out some cities. Took them back. In the 2nd year of Joash, the son of Jehoaz, king of Israel, reigned Amaziah, the son of Jehoash, king of Judah. Yes, they keep having the same names. Why? Because they're cousins. That's why. So Jehoash, king of Judah, he was 25 years old, and when he began to reign, he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jehoaddan of Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to the things Joash's father did. So he's doing okay, but he's not taking out the high places. Howbeit the high places were not taken away, as the people did sacrifice and burn incense in the high places. They're only supposed to do their sacrifices in Jerusalem. And it came to pass, as soon as the kingdom was confirmed in his hands, that he slew his servants that had slain his king the father. So this is what's going to go on here, and I want to show you guys this. Notice this is Joash, and his father's name is Jehoaz, and his father's name is Amaziah, and then his father's name is, I think, Joash. Okay? Now, when we get to Matthew, and we look at these generations in Matthew, you have all the way down to Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat is the one who gives his son Joram, who is going to be a David person, to marry into the line of Ahab. The next person they list is Hosea, or this is King Uzziah, which is the next generation down from all the people we've been talking about. Everybody who is descended from Ahab for 4 generations, they remove from the line. So this is why they get 14 years. And I've been harping on how they don't keep all the people in. And then I finally figured out the people that they remove from the line are these descendants of Ahab. And what are these descendants of Ahab doing? They're murdering the priests. So you have the first one is Joram, and he's the one who is married into the line of Ahab. So he's not descended from Ahab. But his son is. And his son is going to be the one who Jehu kills. And then his son is going to be the one who is spared. But then he's going to murder the son of the high priest. And so he gets killed in an assassination. And then his son is going to murder the guys who murdered the high priest. And then in the next generation, they're going to make peace. And what you end up with is someone from the line of Zadok. There's a Zadok the second marries into the line of David. And that seems to be how peace is made between the priesthood and the royal line here. And it seems to be Uzziah's son. And Uzziah is going to be a righteous king. And so the reason you have 3 kings missing here. Three kings are just disappeared from this line, is because they're descendants of Ahab and they're involved with murder of the priesthood. That's why. All 3 of them. Or getting murdered by Jehu before they really took the throne. That guy really didn't ever take the throne. So it says, it came to pass as soon as the king was confirmed with his hand, he slew the servants that had slain his king the father, but the children of the murderers he slew not. So remember, those guys, he is not killing them because his father killed a priest because the priest prophesied and he didn't like it. Okay, so his father gets killed. Now he's killing them essentially for treason, sedition, but he's not killing their sons because their sons weren't involved. So he said he didn't kill them according to that which is written in the book of the law of Moses, wherein the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor the children be put to death for their fathers, but every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So he's honoring the law of Moses and how he's doing this, and this is why God is pleased with him. He could have taken out all their families too, and he's like, no, but they killed the guy, the son of the guy who killed them, and your father killed them. And he's like, okay, we'll kill all the murderers, and now we're done. He slew in Edom in the valley of Salt 10,000, and took Selah by war, and called the name of it Joktheel to this day. Then Amaziah, this is the guy I told you who gets uppity, okay? So he kills a bunch of Edomites. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, come, let us look one another in the face. In other words, let's go toe-to-toe. And Jehoash, the king of Israel, sent Amaziah, the king of Judah, saying, the thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, give thy daughter to my son to a wife. And there passed a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and he trode down the thistle. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thy heart is lifted up they lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home, for why shouldest thou meddle to my hurt, and why shouldest that thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee? Okay, so what is this? I would assume that this king had given a daughter in marriage to these Edomites. I think that's the thistle in Lebanon. And the wild beast that trode down the thistle is the Judah taking out Edom. But Amaziah would not hear. Therefore Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, the king of Judah, looked at one another in the face at Bethshemeth, which belongs to Judah. And Judah was put to the worst before Israel, and they fled every man to their tents. And Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, the king of Judah, and the son of Jehoash, and the son of Ahaziah, and Bethshemesh, and they came down to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the cornered gate, 400 cubits. So they're breaking down something about 600 feet of this wall, and basically poured into it. And he took all the gold and the silver and the vessels that he found in the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and the hostages returned to Samaria. So that was the might that he had that they mentioned in the last chapter. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoash, which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? That's interesting. They said the exact same line twice. You see how this is cobbled together. I want you guys to keep understanding this, because it's not meant to be just this one written chronicle. It's meant to be histories of records that are cobbled together by different prophets. And Joash slept with his fathers, and he was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his stead. And Amaziah the son of Joash, the king of Judah, lived after the death of Jehoash king of Israel 15 years. And the rest of the acts of Amaziah, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and slew him there. So he dies in a conspiracy, even though he let those guys' sons live. Why? I don't know. Oh, because he turns away from following the Lord later on in his life. And they brought him on horses, and he was buried in Jerusalem with his fathers to the king of David. So remember how God says he'll revisit his sin onto a house for the third and fourth generation? Well, what you have is the third and fourth generation of those who married in with the line of Ahab through Jezebel are punished. God, he takes them out. They all die of unnatural causes. They're all murdered, essentially. And they're also wiped out from the line of Jesus in Matthew. So apparently the priests are taking this seriously enough to say that's the third and fourth generation from Ahab wiped out, and of the line of David. We should have never married into the line of David, so we're going to remove these guys from the genealogy. And they brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem and his fathers in the city of David. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, which was 16 years old, and made him king instead of Amaziah. Now remember, they keep doing this. He's 16 years old. Remember, they had a 7-year-old 2 generations before him. They're going to do it with another kid who I think is like 8 years old later on. He built Elath, he restored Judah, and after that he slept with his fathers. So this is Azariah, and it says in the 15th year, Amaziah is another name for Uzziah. You want to remember that. In the 5th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, the king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin. So remember, he prophesied that these guys would last 4 generations. And that last generation is going to be 41 years, and this is when the other prophets are going to start popping up. So all the stuff before this is probably written by Elijah and Elisha and other prophets that are scribes under them, going back to other prophets all the way back to Samuel. And from here on forward, this stuff is probably written by prophets who all know Hosea, because Hosea is going to be like 4 kings worth. Isaiah is going to be like 4 kings worth. And then he's going to die during Manasseh. And then during Josiah, which is after Manasseh, that's when Jeremiah pops up, and he's going to close the book. And so you're going to have a bunch of prophets who know each other. And what I want you guys to understand is you have an unbroken tradition of prophets keeping track of the kings of Israel and Judah. And then when we get to Chronicles, we're going to find out that we have an unbroken track record of priests keeping track of the line of Judah, and that's essentially what Chronicles is. So he restored the coast of Israel from the entering of Hamath unto the sea of the plain, according to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke by the hand of the servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, which was at Gath-Hepher. So this is where Jonah enters into the equation. So this is going to be my last chapter here. I'm just going to read the end of this, and then we're going to call it a wrap. But this is where it's during his day that Hosea is going to start prophesying, Amos is going to start prophesying, Joel's going to be prophesying in Judah, and Jonah is going to be prophesying. This is all going to be related to God using the Assyrians as the hammer of judgment, because he was trying to chasten them through the Arameans, and they weren't picking up what he was laying down. So he's going to get the Assyrians, which are going to be much worse. For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel that was very bitter, for there was not any shut up, nor any left, nor any helper in Israel. So this is God's grace. Jonah allows them through Jeroboam to restore a bunch of more land. Remember, his father, they restored a bunch of land, but now he's restoring from Hamath. So let's look at that. Hamath is going to be way up here north of Damascus. So if you remember, the Hamathites were a clan of Canaanites that were defeated all the way back, I think in Joshua's day. And then David is going to take Hamath. David and Solomon are going to take Hamath when they take Damascus. And so he restores that to them. Now, they never take back Damascus, but they get essentially this whole place that says Phoenicia here. This is actually controlled by Asher. They call it Phoenicia because this Phoenician culture is kind of a mixture of Asherites, Danites, and Sidonians. And Phoenicia, I think the name comes from the Greeks. I think it has to do with the phoenix, and it might be because they made a comeback or something like that. I'm not sure, but essentially the Danites and the Asherites wipe out all the cities of this area, all the way up to which is now Turkey, with the exception of Tyre, and then they seem to ally with the people of Tyre, and they start trading and stuff all the way to England. So, and we have proof of that now. We have Haifa, Israel, which is like down here somewhere. Haifa, they've found they found ingots of tin from Cornwall, England, and they can prove through like isotropic radiation that that's where they came from. So they know that they're shipping tin all the way from England to here, and I believe everything having to do with the Trojans and the Norse gods and the Denmark and all this stuff has to do with the tin trade. So the Lord is going easy on them. He's allowing them to restore some land. And then it said the Lord said they would not blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them. Oh, and the Lord said that he would not blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. And the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did and his might and how he warred and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which belonged to Judah for Israel, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son reigned in his stead. So remember, God says his thing's going to continue to fourth generations, and Zechariah is the fourth generation. That's who gets overthrown. Now, we're going to stop there because now we have to start inserting these prophets. And so what I'm going to do is in the next one, I'm going to come back and we're going to read Hosea, probably not all in one setting, but Hosea, Amos, or the order is Amos, then Hosea, then Joel in the south, because they're all predicting the coming of the coming of the Assyrians in the immediate sense, and then things related to the first and second coming of Christ in the latter sense. All of them are. And I'm going to show you because these prophets are going to be quoted by the apostles. And then there's going to be unfulfilled stuff that's left for the last days. Okay? So we know they have dual fulfillments to them because the immediate fulfillment is Assyria. The latter fulfillment is going to be the first and second coming of Christ. And then you have Jonah, who basically goes up to Assyria to sanctify the Assyrians, to get them to repent. And because they turn around and repent, that's why God qualifies them to be his instrument of judgment. Because they're turning around and repenting at the word of a prophet, where Israel is not. That's why, okay? So before Jonah goes and does that, he gets all this land restored to Israel. So God is so gracious to Israel, and he knows how gracious God is because he knows they're undeserving. Remember, he did not depart from Israel, but God felt sorry for him anyways. This is why he doesn't want to go to Assyria, because he knows what's coming. Amos has already prophesied that these Assyrians are going to come get you. And Hosea has been prophesying it too. And so when he goes up to essentially tell them to repent or God's going to destroy them, and he doesn't tell them that. He just says in 40 days you'll be overturned. He knows God's character, and he knows what's been prophesied about them by Amos and Hosea, and that's why he knows they're going to repent and God's going to turn from them, because God already said he would do that kind of thing in Amos. So when we put these things together, it's going to make a lot of sense, and Assyria is going to make a lot of sense. And then the last thing we're going to read is going to be the first, it's just literally like the first 2 or 3 chapters of Isaiah are going to be written in the days of Uzziah and Jeroboam. So Jeroboam is going to rule for 40-some years, and then about halfway through his rule, Uzziah is going to take the throne. And so they actually share rule for about 25 years together. And it's during that period that it seems to be that most of these prophets are going to start to blow up their stuff. Okay? So the next one we go to, we're going to go through the whole book of Amos. Then we're going to go through probably Joel, because Amos and Joel are kind of a pair. Amos to northern Israel and Joel to Judah. And then we're going to go to Hosea. So Amos and Hosea are both kind of telling them to repent, and God might help you out. Hosea is saying, nope, you're going to get it. I'm going to basically cast you off. And he's also going to prophesy Christ leaving and returning to his place. And then Jonah is going to be going to Assyria to basically pull them out, to say, come conquer everybody. And then Isaiah is going to be talking about just what it's like in Israel. So Joel's talking about what's going to happen to Judah. Isaiah is talking about what Judah is like, why what's going to happen is justified. So we'll talk about all these together. It's probably going to take, to go through all 3 of those, 3 videos at least. I can probably do Amos and Joel pretty quick, Hosea and Jonah pretty quick, and then Isaiah. So 2 or 3 videos. Maybe I'll do Jonah and Isaiah last, and then Hosea, try to do it all in one video, or maybe 2. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, we're in 2 Kings 14, and I I would encourage you guys. I know it's kind of hard to keep up, especially when so many of these kings have the same names, and especially because it's going back and forth on, when this reign starts and when that reign starts. It's hard because it's records from both Israel and Judah, and there's very big things going on in each. Chronicles is easier because it's all about Judah, and it's just like, then this king reigned, then this king reigned. You're not going back and forth on the timeline. But I would encourage you guys to just try reading through 1st and 2nd Kings in a couple of settings. Just read it all and just understand the flow of it. And what the narrative is basically saying is that the original sin that God started chastening them for, they never repented of, and the corruption just kept getting worse. Okay? And hope you guys are blessed. And thank you, anyone who's been praying for me. The COVID's getting better. My voice is a little hoarse, but my brain fog is dissipating and stuff, and it's starting to make a comeback. Starting to normalize my sleep a little bit better. And then I'm going to try to keep staying on the stuff from A Serpent by the Way, and then this Old Testament teaching. I might just fully finish the Old Testament before I start on the New. I think that's wise. And then as I do the New, then I'll probably start redoing the Christendom series and try to make that a little bit more crisp, less swearing, and just better information. So I hope you guys are blessed by this, and hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.